Endo, a chuirde. Gads, chun bheith garta stócha be cartúing scara sóisialta dhéanamh do réir mar is féidir, just bhain sláinte go chéine agus agla bhfuil agla aine an cúis céanna, go amagah. Lads fáilte roimh chuig an Comóradh, ha minn an sá a ríist I réig na fionbara, a den Comóradh fearóg, a bhína óglach, a chrid son siir sin na tíre, agus a hógach a bheithe dá bhar son. Céir bliain ó hin, is an an 10 lá saoan néadigus a fithe. Chun tús a chur leis an Comóradh, ba bhailim ire oribh nóméid ceonis le bhór dail. Go amagah. Go amagah. Anis ha bláfles le legan de going a stólam. Your mal is sin dhéanamh anis ar nóig a sin sa te fíordoing. Anis a chuirde is malam ar Seán ó Chrónaín chun óráid agus cúpla focail cóntas ar héal an léach a thuirteoing.
A cáirde géal. Tá míad an seo aniu a cuimhne ar Chriostóir Ó Luasa, céad bliain ó hin fór sé bás ar some poblach na hÉireann. Gaeilgeoir bé agus bhí muintear as ceantarc in Sigíle agus béla ar an Ghaeirg. We're here to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Chriostóir Ó Luasa. He was a student of medicine at University College of Cork, but also a section commander of B Company, 1st Battalion, Cork No. 1 Brigade. Chriostóir lived at No. 3 Pembroke Street. Nowadays that address is known as Coonan's Bar. The year 1919 was a time of increasing pressure on the Irish Republican Army in Cork City, and this led to most of the senior IRA officers, as well as Chriostóir, retreating westwards. For Chriostóir, it was a return home, as his family had deep roots in Kanturk as well as in Sigíle, and he later went on to join the Ballingeary Volunteers, where he continued his work against foreign occupation. On the 28th of July near Guganbarra, Chriostóir took part in the ambush of 2 British military lorries. 3 soldiers were reportedly wounded in this ambush. The 12 soldiers in the second lorry, 11 of them armed, were surrounded by volunteers and disarmed. The volunteers seized all the ammunition in the 2 lorries, then sprinkled the vehicles with petrol and set them on fire. Throughout the year 1919, at least 14,000 police raids were imposed on Irish houses and institutions. At one such raid near Skibbereen, Chriostóir was arrested after he was prominently identified with the volunteers. He was sentenced by court-martial to 3 years imprisonment. He served a portion of his sentence in Cork City before he was transferred to Mountjoy in Dublin. There he joined a hunger strike with other political prisoners. After his release in early 1920, he returned to West Cork, where he rejoined the volunteers of that Gaeltacht region, which was under the command of Micheál O'Sullivan, who described Chriostóir Ó Luasa as one of our best men. On the 15th of September 1920, the neighbouring town of Macroom saw the arrival of enemy reinforcements in the form of Auxiliary C Company. They were stationed at both Macroom Castle and the nearby Mount Massey House. These newly arrived auxiliaries began the process of establishing a reign of terror over the local inhabitants. Utter disdain was shown for the people of the West Cork Gaeltacht. Sunday after Sunday, C Company systematically descended on Ballingeary at mass time in order to corral and abuse the villagers as they emerged from worship. Months later, in reflection, the commander of C Company, Colonel Buxton Smith, would say, "When I first came to Macroom, I knew little what I was in for. Then I could trust no one. My men were getting hard to hold. They couldn't walk a yard or go into a shop without danger, and they were savage for revenge." Colonel Smith said his men were savage for revenge. In the mind of the imperialist, any resistance to their will is viewed as a crime worthy of revenge and violence. Under this mindset, untold suffering was meted out to the people of West Cork and the entire country. On the 10th of November 1920, these auxiliaries were dispatched on a shoot-to-kill mission towards Toreen Dove, where Chriostóir Ó Luasa was staying with friends and comrades, the Toomies. The volunteer commander, Micheál O'Sullivan, explains that since the house at Toreen Dove was practically on the roadside and well known to the enemy, Chriostóir did not sleep there at night. Instead, He had his sleeping quarters at the opposite side of the road in a bailick high up on the hillside. He had established a routine of coming downhill each morning, crossing the road and entering the house. As Chriostóir descended the hill, his view of the road and the valley became more limited. He had actually crossed the road when the auxiliaries arrived, and seeing him, immediately opened fire on him. He gained the shelter of the house, and had ill fortune not intervened, would have got away from them. Immediately behind the house, a massive rock rose vertically. To provide for such an emergency, as was Chriostóir's, a ladder always stood in place against the rock, but it had been temporarily removed, and Chriostóir had no option but to make a detour of the rock. This brought him again into view of an enemy who shot him. He was not armed. It was a pity, for it was a remarkable fact that even a shot or two engaged with these auxiliaries disturbed their aim unduly. And that was Micheál O'Sullivan's comment. The enemy who shot Chriostóir lied to his own section commander about the incident to cover the fact that he shot and killed a visibly unarmed man at close range. When asked to account for this, the auxiliary cadet complained about the fuss being made over his shooting of Lucy, and he then proceeded to replace the 2 empty shells in his Colt revolver before stating, "I'll get another before I'm finished." When those auxiliaries returned to Macroom that evening, an IRA volunteer, Jamie Moynihan, observed that they entered the market bar and began to celebrate. They were toasting one man in particular, who was describing in detail how he'd taken aim and fired the fatal shot. The barman, an ex-RIC man named Vaughan, was able to identify the man, and he informed the Macroom volunteers. A few weeks later, these marauding auxiliaries were tracked to Kilmichael, a few miles to the south of the area, and 17 of them were killed, an action which altered the course of the War of Independence. Lucy was given an impressive funeral and burial here at St Finbar Cemetery, despite the efforts of Crown forces to suppress attendance at his funeral. When the funeral cortege had left Dunbar Street and turned onto George's Quay, a British armoured car and 2 lorries of soldiers took up position in the procession immediately before the mourners' carriages. Even so, the side paths along the route to the cemetery were lined with spectators who saluted with sympathy the body of Chriostóir Ó Luasa, aged just 22 years when his life was cut short at Tuaring Duff, or Yeshde go raibh ann.
Gur míle maith agat Seán. Anis, fear a thug gael leis idir a féin agus an óglach céanna a tháinig den of Comóradh Danny Mikey thorcú tá cúpla focail doing le thoil.
Well, Shem Gael Hagum Sele, Chriostóir Ó Luasa, na Darai Fashir Gudi, I'm sure Kakem in here, and Optiak Fair here. Shemus more Branach, Shania and common ancestor Hagen Bertering. So, the hog Shemus part Kakem in here in. So bhí an 8 fé héan agus tá rudan sagam mar geolir. Seo dúirt iníon Seamus mór Branach mar geolir Chacheminia. For many years the story was told how Seamus Welsh came down the hill and the western end of the pass of Cheminia, as he knew the soldiers were after passing eastwards at the time. Smith, who was walking at the rear of the soldiers, noticed him from a distance and returned westwards to meet him. Instead of running away, as perhaps Smith expected to happen, Seamus Welsh confronted him and a hand-to-hand fight ensued, which culminated in the death of Smith, and Seamus escaped unhurt. Now, Seamus Mór Brannach's daughter was Chriostóir Ó Luasa's grandmother, and Seamus Mór Brannach was my grandmother's grandfather, if you can figure it out from there. It is a bit convoluted, it is a bit far out, but Shin Marahan Gael gumsalish. Agus Seamus Moore, he was married for a considerable time, and later a daughter of his married Patrick Lucy, a farmer from Coolgreenan near Inchigeela. Mrs. Patrick Lucy died at the age of 101 years, and during her lifetime took pride in relating the part played by her father in the Battle of Caminea. She had 4 sons, one of whom was John Lucy of the firm of Lucy and O'Connell of Mulgrave Road, Cork, whose son Christopher Lucy gave his life for Irish freedom in 1920 when he was shot by the Tans. Agus stocha cadachanning a Caminea stocha teshin piece sin ra. Ka shaving lan and kema ni vleri shavim she mar den an fiesen ihe kan shir sol ik mag no shalom fenig is ik den of mas minte gestoch de wilter lebingon anon nor chwalen chaetach den year is lor na nachetach lesions le fuan man narim de chrihen schlier near veng lamangor another mar hakoch garda de chonevni agus komachri na sarir dagder gantror Niran farbanna pashte emonatro na dirha na gargelvika snamil talagon Fiachinter narda galadin dimple alach iselina saskilen dro anlioger laivadegin Shedwar kaflander valestrio Gloshing mar pan kalarier is temish nechor another nasarer Gimaser clanagel Amanadar na panig lefanig ershol Ba yare doing the danig lavladir na dimple da skapader admine gach wheeling finger in barach num bale kababnit agus feature hedges agus fetus the meal telelo arina vart gelagiged gan flog, gan weiß, gan ra, gan schiens, Gatin til mara masnabian gan feshu gado kiad malamor lehisa magila merasandair akvedian agdingde sa ancient so.
Golimina Mahagatani, Corsius Anias agus Aruna Chriostóir Cúra Chriostóir Ó Luasa. Anish con hort con cleine cén fó frid na hóglaigh céanna íram anish Antón Banach forlógra na fodlachta a léamh amach doing Antón le hall.
Public na Héireann, the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army. Having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and supported by her exiled children in America and gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it in arms. Standing on that fundamental right, and again asserting it in arms in the face of the world, we hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state. And we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and of its exaltation among the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every Irishman and Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and of all its parts, cherishing all of the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government, which have divided a minority from the majority in the past, until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government, representative of the whole people of Ireland and elected by the suffrages of all her men and women. The provisional government hereby constituted will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms, and we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonour it by cowardice, inhumanity or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valour and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clark, Sean McDermott, Tomás McDonagh, P.H. Pearce, Eamon Cant, James Connolly and Joseph Plunkett.
Goramach Anton. Anish Osrode Gorgwell Gore a V a Chriostóir Ó Luasa, ha bilog biog feilse in Nuging, agus in a homlán a squaling, ha sulgum gynnig dini Irecht a lev, agus hogant board lesh, gur rod táchtach ar tangan náisiúnta agus chun beidir Irecht dhéana bhí a fálam agus a bhúsáid níos minic namar a ging. Today we have a leaflet published fully in Irish, which is to respect the fact that Chriostóir Ó Luasa was an Irish speaker, and it is of course our national language, and hopefully we'll make an effort to read that flyer and take on board the study of our own native language. It is an essential part of whom we are, and the day is waiting for it to be back in its rightful place, which will happen. So there is some other literature and a very important pamphlet that the Independent National Commemoration Committee published this year on the period of 1920 in Cork. It's all available. Eddie there, if you want to put your hand up, Eddie. Eddie has these, so people might approach Eddie after. And I do know also the Cork Fenian Society, Fianna Corky, who are assisting in the organising of these events, and in fact who are the organisers of the coming commemoration of the Manchester Martyrs, which will take place on the 21st, I think, of this month. But there are membership forms for Fianna Corky, agus Hod Sonner Fall O Tomás. Tomás, wave your hand there so people can see you. There's Tomás. So, conclech nu, better than a made a nod a dhéanamid a gcónaí agus canamid órán a bhíon le chéile le bhordal. Sin a fianna fáil a háfiáil le geireann, windar sló a haar tír a ránig goin, berid vorve ser, shantir ar sinshir fasta, niar for fetir ar grafetra, anok gahem salar na mwen, ne galer gwel konpas nuser, ne galer ishgrel, Filach na kilir, shaif kani aron vil. Buíocha spéisialta don Cork Brigade Reenactment Group a Sasnaigh go díoltas gach éin seachtain. Further events, people, in the coming weeks, and there's an event every single weekend, are listed on the back of some of those flyers that have been given out there. Gur míle gach sin gur maithagh sin deireadh.